Okay, good morning. It's 9 o'clock. I will call the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Commissioners meeting to order, and we will start with a salute to the flag. Mr. Mayberry, would you lead us today?
Yes, sir. Please join me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Von Hartung, Chair.
Present.
Bob Lucy, Vice Chair, is absent.
Is he on
Marcia
the phone,
Burke-Bigler?
Madam Clerk?
Not for this meeting.
Okay.
Kitty Jung?
Present.
Jeannie Herman?
Here.
Chief Charles Moore?
Here.
And Nathan Edwards, Deputy District Attorney?
Here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item number 3, Chief, public comment.
Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items, with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the fire commissioners as a whole.
Thank you, Chief. I have no one listed to speak. Madam Clerk, do you have anyone?
I have no one signed in, sir.
Okay. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Item number 4, Commissioners, Fire Chief's announcements, request for information, and topics and future agendas. I'll just jump into that, Chief. Go ahead.
I do have a couple of announcements, Mr. Chairman. On Saturday, June 1st, district's going to hold an open house at Station 39 in Galena Forest from 10 a.m. to noon. And this event is targeted to the residents of St. James Village, Montreux, Galena Forest, and some communities downstream. On Mount Rose Highway, we're going to talk about signing up for Code Red to make sure that everyone is prepared. NV Energy is going to attend to talk about their evolving plan to de-energize the grid when we have high wind, and generally answer questions for the community. And then on the same day, Saturday, June 1st, there'll be an open house at Lemon Valley, Station 440, to talk a lot about the same things. And on Saturday, June 8th, at the Palomino Valley Volunteer Fire Station 450, from noon to 3, we'll be talking about similar topics.
Okay. Is that all, Chief?
That is it.
All right. Commissioners, Commissioner Herman, I have you signed in.
I think I'm on. Made a lot of noise there. I just wanted to say, while I was at the WIR conference, almost every single day there was a fire reported in my district. And I just wanted to thank you guys all while I was gone for taking care of everything, as usual. Thank you.
Okay. I have no one else. Commissioners, anyone else? Okay. I will close item number 4. Chief, item number 5, consent. Item number 5, consent. We've closed item number 4.
Item 5 are consent items, and if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer those for the board if there are any.
Commissioners, any questions on the consent agenda? Anything need any answers or need to pull any items?
Move approval.
I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Herman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those, well, actually, before I do that, I have no one signed in wishing to speak. Is there any, Madam Clerk, any public comment on consent?
I have no one signed in.
Okay. So I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Herman. No discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, I believe, with Commissioner Lucy not being in attendance. Chief, item number 6.
Item number 6, IAFF Local 2487 report. We'd like to pull that, Mr. Chairman, for the
Okay.
reason that there's nothing to report, so says the union.
Okay, item number 6 pulled. Item number 7.
Item
your
7
report.
is a fire chief's report for discussion only. Item 8 is informational briefing on operational matters and activities for the month of April. And although it says May, we do not have any statistics for May in your board packet. So item 1 and 2, I'll just take together. Deployment study, again, we're working on that and hope to have that ready in September. And item 2, July, we're wrapping up our strategic plan and we'll bring that back to the board in July. I did want to hand out just a brief slice of data that we're taking a look at because there are some interesting things that are popping up. As I mentioned, Heather Kerwin, the statistician for the health district, is helping us do the analysis. And we found some interesting things in at least the EMS section, which she's taken a stab at. So if I may have the clerk hand out that report. I don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
So for a long time, we've known that the call volume is disproportionate from the south to the north. But it's interesting to see that in Sun Valley and Spanish Springs, which accounts for almost 50% of our total call volume in the district, that calls are actually starting to decline. And we've overlapped the REMSA priority with the number of calls per station, so that in that second table that you see, priority 0 are calls that are essentially canceled, priority 1 are life-threatening, priority 2 are medium acuity, and priority 3 are non-life-threatening acuity. And priority 9 are omega calls, which are typically not dispatched to. When you turn the page and look over that, we're seeing quite a few priority 3 calls that we see that there are opportunities to reduce call volume rather than always send an engine and a full paramedic crew to non-life-threatening calls. So we're starting to see that as an opportunity where we can actually reduce our call volume, particularly in the communities that you see there. But it's interesting to note that as a percentage of total calls, the highest number of priority 1 calls are happening in Arrow Creek as a percentage of the calls that they totally respond to. So I just wanted to give you a brief slice. We're going to do a comprehensive data analysis on all types of calls that we have. Heather Kerwin is amazingly competent in her ability to do the data analysis. And then once all that data is done, we'll bring it to you and talk about what our opportunities are for deploying stations in different locations, or perhaps even strengthening certain types of resources. I know, Commissioner, you have often, Mr. Chairman, you've often talked about the use of a rescue. We'll actually model that to see what that does for the deployment and the response scheme, as well as look at other possible solutions. With the strategic plan, again, we're about 80% done, and we'll be bringing that to you, as I mentioned, in July. Item B is review of response statistics for April 2019. I'll let the report stand unless there's any questions.
Okay, hold on just a second here, Chief. Commissioner Jung, I see you're signed in. I'm assuming it's on the analysis.
Yep, thank you. So here's my question, and I don't know what the best practices are now. If our crew members are idle and not called to another call, what is the harm of rolling to calls, period? Can you bring me back I don't want speculation, can you bring me back best practices? It used to be roll on every call because you're always getting practice, and you know, the wear and tear on the machinery is negligible, and it's good to just roll rather than to deny. So if you could bring me back the best practices today with a station of this size facing these financial issues, what would be the best practice? Because I don't know. I do know when we were in an interlocal agreement with Reno, we had long philosophical discussions about, do they sit there or do they roll? Do they work? So can you tell me, can you find out and get back to me the best practices on this size station, this type of geographical region? Because I know what we're trying to get away from, right, is that they're on a call that might be a priority 3, and they get another call that's priority 1, and then we don't really have coverage there. So I'm just trying to see where the sweet spot is between the two, because if you make a blanket statement, we will not make these 3 calls, sometimes 3s turn into 1 because of dispatch. And not because of dispatch fault, because the person calling isn't clear about what's happening, or it escalates in terms of a seriousness. So I'd like to see, what does the data say now about that situation?
You're absolutely right, Commissioner Jung, that the threat would be simultaneous calls.
Right. Thank you.
And on that same note, Chief, I mean, I guess from my perspective is, perhaps we can try to establish the model, and this is not something that's different in other metropolitan areas, where we do dispatch rescues for some of these calls, and you know, instead of trying to dispatch a full complement, you dispatch something that's smaller. And I think it's the analogy would be the sheriff's office doesn't dispatch the SWAT team when there's a traffic stop. You know, they only dispatch the SWAT team when they need to. And so I think that looking at the rescue model, I think that can, and especially if we have a rescue or a pair of rescues that move throughout the system, I think we can probably use some of those southern stations, the resource at those stations, the man hours, to cover those calls. And just try to balance the system out, because when you look at Sun Valley, I mean, we've got 3,700 calls in Sun Valley, and then you've got 24, almost 2,500 calls. So how do we balance that out?
We do have an opportunity to partner with REMSA. We've had significant discussions with Dean Dow. They face the same problem with the number of priority 3s. So there's opportunities to partner with REMSA and the solution as well.
Right. But I don't disagree with Commissioner Jung. Priority 3s can turn into a priority 1. It is possible. I'm not feeling well, and then suddenly it turns into a heart attack, right?
Excuse me, I didn't have a heart attack.
And I have a neighbor that actually happened to, and they went to an urgent care, and then the urgent care, when they ran his vitals, they were like, oh my God, and they called REMSA immediately and ran him to the hospital because he was having a heart attack. So I don't disagree with that position at all, not at all. But maybe we can find that sweet spot. Commissioner Burke-Bickler, I have you signed in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was curious, Chief, do you know if the decrease in the percentages, so Cold Springs would be a good example of, on the second page, there's showing a 14% change, negative change. Does any of that have anything to do with the annexations of the city of Reno?
Commissioner Burke-Bickler, I think not, because those annexations really don't have any population at this time. And we really don't know why it's gone down 14%. But this is the first pass, and then we take a deeper dive into the data to find out why.
Thank you very much.
Okay. This is enlightening report, Chief. What else do you have?
That is all for the fire chief's report.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Item number 8.
Item 8 is a recommendation to approve retroactive and continued purchases for needed supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services from various suppliers that have or will exceed in the aggregate $100,000 during this fiscal year, but will remain within available adopted budget funding. All such purchases will continue to be subject to and in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Purchasing Act. Vendors receiving these additional funds include the following: JBP, LLC, DBA Silver State International, Harris Corporation, Interstate Oil Company, Ellen Curtis and Sons, and Manpower Temporary Services. Amounts to be paid to each of these vendors respectively shall not exceed the following: $150,000, $120,000, $160,000, and $110,000, and $175,000. The supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services to be provided by each include but are not limited to equipment, repairs, radios, fuel, personnel protective gear, and administrative services. Give you a little background, most of these are for Silver State, I can say, is repairs of rolling stock. Harris Corporation are for radios and additional radios. Interstate Oil is for fuel. Ellen Curtis is for equipment to go on our new engines, our Type 1 engines, and our new tenders. And Manpower Services, we typically use Manpower for contracted help and administration with secretarial and administrative support.
Okay. Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in.
Actually, Mr. District Attorney, this is for the previous item. I just noticed something. Can we go back to that previous item?
If the chair, yeah, the chair can
So
reopen the
let's,
previous
so
item.
let's, can
Okay,
we
yeah.
finish item 8 first,
Absolutely.
Commissioner Jung?
Sure,
And
sorry.
then before we proceed to item 9, we'll go back to item 7.
Thank you.
If that's okay. Okay. Any questions for the chief on item number 8? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion. Actually, let me see, I have no one signed in as for public comment. Madam Clerk?
There is no one signed in.
Okay,
Move approval.
I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Herman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, with the board's indulgence, we will open back up item number 7. Commissioner Jung.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is in regards to item 7A. I see that we have our automatic aid report, and this is different than before. How come we don't have any other places of received or given other than Sparks?
This has been the report that I presented based on Chairman Hartung's request to show on a continual basis of our automatic aid between Sparks and TM specifically. We don't necessarily, we do track the automatic aid and mutual aid relationship between the city of Sparks, or city of Reno, I'm sorry. But nevertheless, it's not reported.
It's been reported always in the past, what our auto aid was and what we received, not even just from Reno, but we even had Carson, and what's happened to that report?
Well, from time to time, we do update that. I believe it's
I'd like to see a full report from this. The board didn't take action to tell you to change reporting, so I need to see all of it, who we give aid to and whom we receive aid from, as we have in the past.
very well.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on item number 7? All right, we will go back to we're on item number 9. Chief?
Item 9 is a recommendation to approve a 3-year interlocal agreement with a possible 1-year extension between Washoe County for and on behalf of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for dispatch services provided by WCSO for a fee not to exceed $875,000 per fiscal year. This agreement is for dispatching services. It's a flat fee and will be the same amount for the 3 years of the term.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? See no one signed in. Madam Clerk, is there anyone under public comment wishing to speak?
There is no one signed in, sir.
Okay. Commissioners,
Move approval.
have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Herman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Discussion,
I'm
please.
sorry. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, I didn't see it. Commissioner Jung.
So do you go out to bid for this? Or how does this work for dispatch services? Is there only one dispatch service center you can use? How does this work? Because that's a lot of money. It's almost $1 million. What's the law on that, Mr. District Attorney?
Well, the dispatch services is via a federal system that they're called the PSAPs, the Public Safety Answering Points, and you have to have access to the federal Annie and Alley switch information, and there's a few designated PSAPs, as you probably already know, in the area. There's the City of Reno, there's the Sparks, there's the Sheriff's, and then there's the, I think there's one up in Incline Village, and then there's also REMSA acts, or at least used to act as a secondary PSAP. So I don't think there's a market that we can just go tap into.
From
for-
those different ones, you wouldn't take a request
Oh,
for
from the
proposal?
other governmental entities? I mean, I suppose you could theoretically field, proposals from them. I don't think it's a requirement, if that's what you're asking, but I do think it's, it's a possibility that you could, seek that out if you wanted to. It was my understanding that this has been an ongoing, contractual relationship with the sheriff's office, but I think that's the summary of the law on it is.
Okay, so he's not required to go out to bid because
don't
it's
believe
of a
so.
certain number. Can you double check that?
I can, yes.
Thank you. I think as we're talking about consolidating dispatch and, we are not in the best practices mode in this valley with our dispatching. That should be something that the chief should look into of lowest, most responsible and responsive bidder. And perhaps that will push agencies to collaborate and create a dispatch center. I'm not arguing that we don't need a secondary dispatch in case of an emergency, but having these disparate dispatch centers and having civil servants work right next to each other doing the exact same job and being paid different wages. So I'm just wondering, in the future, in your spare time, Mr. Fire Chief, if that might be something that might be an exercise in futility, but also might demonstrate to the region that we're serious about the consolidation and streamlining for public safety and for taxpayers, a fully regional dispatch center. So I'll support this now because this is a monkey wrench right here at the last hour, and I see this as a 3-year interlocal. But it might be something that we look into in the future, who will provide it for us for the best, according to our values, but also according to just our bottom line. So I'll support it. I don't think we need to argue about it at this point, but I think it's something that we should be looking further in the future. It's $1 million expenditure of a fairly small budget compared to the rest of the region. So that would be, and a budget that is declining. And it might be a way to get people on the same page to play ball. Maybe not. It might be an exercise in futility, but we have tried almost everything at this point. And let's try another one. But I will support the motion. I wanted to put that disclaimer in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold my thoughts for a moment. Commissioner Burke-Bigler, I see you're signed in as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think the sheriff is actually also working on this project, I believe, on the compiling dispatch together. So I know the sheriff is working on it. So I think Commissioner Jung makes a good point, maybe that if you're not already on board working with the sheriff, which I thought you were. So, I mean, I think that's something that we all need to look at and make sure that we are getting an effective program put together. So, and I know the sheriff has been working on it, so it's a good idea. Thank you.
So my only comment will be that just we absolutely need to revamp dispatch. There's just no question of it. It's and correct with along with the crime lab, but that's a discussion for another day. We need to talk about. Yep, understand. Okay. Madam Clerk, I see no one signed in under public comment. Do you have anyone?
I have no one signed in.
Okay, so we have no public comment. I guess I have a motion. I do. I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Herman. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 10. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 10 is a recommendation to approve a retroactive collective bargaining agreement between the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Firefighters Association, IAFF Local 2487, for a one-year term, and if approved, authorize the chairman to sign on behalf of the board and to authorize the execution of a resolution augmenting the Truckee Meadows Fire General Fund salaries expense account from the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District General Fund contingency account in the amount of $265,000 for possible action. Mr. Chairman, I will note that when we posted the agenda, there was a minor technical glitch with trying to get the red line version of this posted. For some reason, Granicus did not accept the red line version, and it took us about an hour and a half to resolve that technical problem to get the red line posted. So we are relying on state statute that says NRS 288.153 that there is an exception for technical problems with the website. And we just simply wanted to disclose to the board and to the public that there was an hour and a half delay in getting the red line version posted. Nevertheless, it has been up available to the public.
Are the numbers substantively different, Chief?
There are no numbers that changed. It was just simply the red line version that showed the changes between the old version and the new version.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, I see none. Madam Clerk, is there anyone in the public wishing to speak?
There's no one signed in.
Okay, Commissioners, I will entertain a motion. Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Birkbigler, second by Commissioner Herman, was it? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't hear. Forgive me. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Please affirm your votes. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Chief.
Mr. Chairman, item 11 is a public hearing. Item 11 is discussion and possible approval of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District tentative budget, including possible changes and/or action to adopt the final budget for fiscal year 2019-20. This item may be continued to Tuesday, May 28th, 2018 at 9 a.m. Estimated fiscal year 2019-20 general fund revenues are $30,876,676, and estimated general fund expenditures are $30,867,893, broken down into the following 10 cost centers: standalone overhead, administration, operations, training, fire prevention, fleet maintenance, fuels management, emergency medical, logistics, reserve volunteer program. In addition to the general fund expenditures, the proposed budget also includes expenditures from the following 5 other funds: Capital Projects Fund, $2,620,500; the Emergency Fund, $1,468,000; the Sick Annual and Comp Benefits Fund of $725,000; Workers' Comp Internal Service Proprietary Fund of $507,500, and Stabilization Fund of $500,000. Total estimated expenditures under the general fund and additional 5 funds in this proposed budget is approximately $36,688,893, plus an additional $300,000 contingency. As I mentioned before the meeting started, Mr. Chairman, that the state revenue numbers changed just slightly right after we posted the agenda and the subject line. So staff would like to hand out a revised staff report. The numbers that are very immaterial, they're very minor changes. Nevertheless, we want to disclose those for the board and for the public. I can go over exactly what those changes are, but they are very de minimis, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I have the report to pass out and place on file for
Madam
record.
Clerk, please.
I do, thank you. So while the clerk is handing these out, I will note that that the revenues from the agenda item are corrected from $30,752,372 from $30,876,676. That is the biggest material change. And again, the number from the state changed just right after we posted the agenda, so there really wasn't any time for us to react to that.
So about 124,000, something like that.
I will note that our ending fund balance is proposed to be 19.1% at the end of the year. And in the staff report, you will see, again, the breakdown of the significant programs, the cost center grouping, and basically a recap of what we presented last month. So staff recommends the adoption of this budget, and if there are no changes, then we simply will adopt this and get it filed with the state.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Jung?
Did you say in the last meeting that we had that you were front-loading the employee assistant program? You said 25,000 is all that you put into that in this year's fiscal budget?
Commissioner Jung, that was the request of staff, but for the reason
Who's
that
staff? The union or the fiscal staff?
all staff, all members, although the union didn't really make a recommendation for that, although they support it, it came from rank and file staff to do the program. So for the reason that we were $2 million over our revenues, we did cut back to about $1 million, and we cut back a number of programs, and that was one of the line items we reduced from 25,000 to, I believe it was 12,000. And so that'll get us started for next year. The plan for bridging the gap in the shortfall of revenues is that we have quite a bit of outstanding fire bills that have yet to be paid. So our plan for bridging the gap between revenues and expenditures will be to wait for those billings to come in, and then we will propose to augment the budget and fill the gap between revenues and expenditures, if I'm making sense. And when those revenues come in, then we can take a look at specific line items and specific programs to restore the funding that we cut.
Excuse me. Okay, but I'm still not understanding here. So that went down. And then what happens, what are you doing with the number 2 and number 3 positions in your organization? Are those funded in this budget?
They are funded. I have a plan to bring in a Deputy Chief of Operations sometime in the next month or two. Deputy Chief of Fire Prevention is going to have to wait until November or December, which I am assuming those duties until we're able to fund that position.
Fire prevention, so is that like wildland and?
That is plan review. It is inspections, ongoing inspections of existing occupancies. It's community outreach.
So you'll
And-
be doing the inspections for, as the fire marshal?
I won't, but staff will. So I'm leading the division until we hire a new fire marshal. So it was necessary to freeze that position for 6 months in order to save money.
Why is that?
We looked for opportunities across the board in trying to bring down the deficit from what was proposed as $2 million to $1 million.
Why do you believe we have a deficit?
We
Was
took
our
it-
property taxes not coming in like we had anticipated, or?
Well, we have a deficit largely because the revenues did not necessarily keep pace from what we expected them to be. And in order to keep pace with the programs that we have now, there simply is a deficit of about $1 million that we propose to, we recommend to the board to accept that, and we'll fill that gap again when fire bills come in.
Okay, can I ask you for the next meeting to do an analysis, maybe use Ms. Kerwin, of how annexation has affected us, say, the last 5 years, and a projection of how annexation will affect us in the 5 years after that with all of the approved, not yet built areas in, and plans that the cities have for the areas they've annexed, to maybe get an idea when we look at next year's budget of what we can anticipate or not anticipate into the future.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for the chief on the budget? Okay, if not, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to speak in the public? I have no one signed in.
No one has signed in.
Okay, close public comment. I will entertain a motion. Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Burkbigler, second by Commissioner Herman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chief?
Item 12 is presentation and on district and union proposals offered during labor negotiations. This was an item that the board asked us to bring back proposals for public comment. Primarily, we understood that the board wanted us to present economic proposals, and we did not anticipate as a staff that there would be discussion or direction to staff, but merely to bring the economic proposals to the board. And we would then adjourn to closed session where the board could give us broader direction as to the proposals. So Mr. Watts-Viel is here to summarize what we have thus far. And if you wouldn't mind, David, coming to the podium.
Mr. Chair, I do have a handout for this to place on the record and hand out.
Okay, would you disperse that, please? Mr. Watts-Viel, welcome.
Good morning. David Watts-Viel with the Washoe County District Attorney's Office, part of the district bargaining team. Pursuant to previous direction by the board requested that proposals and budgetary impacts or costing be presented. And to date, there's really only been one economic proposal that was made. It was made by the non-supervisory unit. That had to do with education pay. And specifically, the proposal was that the personnel who have an associate's degree from an accredited university receive compensation of an additional 1.5% of the employee's base pay in biweekly payroll. For personnel who have a bachelor's degree, it would be an increase in 3% of the employee's base pay. And then any employee who is eligible for both education incentives would receive a 4.5% increase of the employee's base pay. The cost for that, I'm going to let Chief Moore address, which were done by Cindy Vance.
Mr. Chairman, we've handed out a cost summary of that particular proposal, and it's important to note that the union's proposal is based on a percentage of base pay, which would escalate over time, and it is summarized to be approximately in dollars for next year's fiscal budget to be just under $200,000. Although that cost will certainly escalate over time as salaries increase and as step increases occur.
Okay, so Mr. Watts-Viel, can we discuss the benefits of this?
Well, you can, but the direction that we received in the past and the recommendation of staff has been that if we're going to have anything that looks like an involved discussion, that
We do that
discussion
in
should occur in
closed.
closed session.
Understood.
That
Okay,
would be done to preserve strategy and allow you to give direction to your bargaining team.
okay,
Mr. Chairman, I might note that the city of Sparks and the city of Reno have something similar within their contracts, and I believe it's the union's desire to get something closer to what exists in those two jurisdictions.
all right. Commissioners, I think this is just informational. But any comments? Okay. So we're not taking action on this. This is for, so we are styled for action.
So, Mr. Chair, it was styled for action to allow, in case there was some discussion, and also to allow for public comment. Not that you would need to have the action
Okay.
items for public comment, but the idea was that you could take public comment.
Okay. All right, I have no commissioners signed in. Is there anyone wishing to ask questions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, do you have anyone signed in?
I have no one signed in.
Okay, so I will close that, and I don't think we need a motion. Okay, Chief, item 13, do we need a closed session?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll let the chief take a crack at the procedures, the procedural approach to this. I've been speaking with Mr. Watts Vial as far as the protocol for you guys to close the session on this. And I'm slightly unclear about whether you want to do items 14, 15, and 16, then do the motion to close the session with the announcement that the caucus room will be open once the closed session is completed, and then public comment will be taken again at that point in time, and then the meeting will officially be adjourned. Or if you want to close the session now and leave 14, 15, and 16 all for that later time. And Mr. Wattsfield is at the podium, I see out of the corner of my eyes, so he can shed a little more light on that possibly.
So do we have the need for a closed session, Mr.
Yes, you do have a need for a closed session. Typically, what the board would do is go ahead and proceed with the rest of the agenda, including the public
Right.
comment, and then return to item 13, make a motion to go into recess for the closed session in caucus, which would occur after the BCC meeting that's going to be held after this.
Correct.
At the end of that closed session, the doors would be open to allow for additional public comment, and then that would be the final adjournment of the meeting.
Got it, right, so we would just go into recess. Okay. Okay, so I need a motion to go into closed session, and then we will take items 14 and 15, and then we will recess.
Mr. Chair, I think what the plan was to pause or skip item 13 now, finish 14, 15, and 16, and then come back to 13 and do the motion for closed session.
Okay, and then we'll take a final public comment upstairs.
Yes, and that will be after the closed session is done and the caucus room is then opened.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's go to item 14. Chief.
Item 14 is discussion and direction to staff regarding 2019 Nevada legislative session and other legislative issues proposed by legislators or by other entities permitted by the Nevada State Legislature to submit bill draft requests or such legislative issues as may be deemed by the chair or the board to be of critical significance to Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. We've been tracking a number of bills. I think there's probably only two that I'd like to mention. One is Senate Concurrent Resolution SCR2, which directs the Legislative Commission to conduct an interim study concerning fire protection and related emergency services in Washoe County, which has been sponsored by Senator Kekeffer. The bill has had no hearings or workshops, and we don't have any information as to when it will happen, but nevertheless, we're tracking it. Assembly Concurrent Resolution ACR4 directs the Legislative Commission to conduct an interim study concerning wildfires, namely looking at ways to address wildfire fuels and the economic impacts of wildfires. And one other is just as soon as I find it. SB 329 was submitted by the Nevada Fire Chiefs Association and requires electric utilities to submit a natural disaster to include wildfire protection plan to the Public Utilities Commission. I wanted to mention that the fire chiefs and county manager and his staff met with NV Energy yesterday concerning a proposal from NV Energy to possibly de-energize certain portions of the electrical grid when we have high wind events. And as you may recall, that the fire in California, Camp Fire, is alleged to have been caused by PG&E in that particular wind event. So what this does, though, is it makes it possible for closer relationships between fire and the utility company, particularly NV Energy, to do fuel reduction underneath power lines and to get aggressive on that. And I believe NV Energy is very, very concerned about that, and we are making plans then to start a project, which my number one is the power line under, as it runs through Verdi, which the fuels in Verdi are very, very old and very, very robust. And I've been talking to Linda Bissett at NV Energy about gearing up to do that fuels project in conjunction with NDF. It'll be a fairly large effort to remove a lot of the fuels there. So those are the top three, I think, that are of interest to the board.
Okay, and Chief and I, I'm not trying to be pedantic, but I didn't see any of those listed on the, that's the counties? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. No wonder. All right. My only concern on a just kind of on a basic level with de-energizing is I would want to make sure that Tumwa was on board. I would hate to see wells go down and not have the ability to pump water during a major fire event. And if you have no power, you're on a private well, you have no power, you have no ability also to fight the fire on your own. So I'm not arguing the need, it's just, I guess there's some logistics to work out that, how do we address these kinds of issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not only water, but there's emergency medical equipment that people rely on at home.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
There's fire
Absolutely.
alarm and fire sprinklers that their
Yes.
backup power supply potentially would exhaust.
Yes.
There's the backup power supplies to our radio system that would potentially exhaust. So there's all kinds of planning that we need to do in preparation for this. But nevertheless, we are seeing, potentially will see, more high wind events and drier vegetation that when branches become airborne, there's really nothing that the utility can do. So there's a number of steps. This is not a shotgun approach by any means. I think NV Energy is being very thoughtful, engaging the community, engaging the local fire departments, and local law enforcement.
And the public utility,
And the public utility.
water utility.
So I may mention that on June 1st at the open house in Galena, NV Energy will be present to start talking about this. And there's a significant amount of public education that will need to occur before this really rolls out.
Understood. Commissioner Jung, I have you signed in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fire Chief, who pays for the fuel reductions underneath the NV Energy power lines?
NV Energy would likely be.
Okay, and the labor and all of that, okay, great.
Yes.
And then you mentioned Verdi as an area that's a priority. I think I would also say Collin Ranch up on that ridge that you fought how many times now? That fire, twice. And then could you come back with us, kind of like what your prioritization is when you do sit down with MV Energy countywide, where you identify as our major hotspots or risk areas so that we all can communicate that as well to our constituents and have some input on it if need be. But I'd like to hear your professional recommendation, and I agree with the Verdi and the old fuels and the new growth and people that love to fight, to shoot guns in places that they probably shouldn't be and lighting fires, but definitely, and I'm sure you're thinking of it because you've had 2 fires up there, that Collin Ranch Ridgeline is, every year it seems like we're fighting a fire there of the same people. So another area I would recommend, and I'm not sure if that's you or the city of Reno, is where we've had fires twice, the exact same spot and the exact same 5 homes burnt down was up off of Scottsdale. So if you're talking about it regionally with your friends here locally, that's an area too that, and both times that they burnt to the ground, it was kids playing with matches in the ditch that hadn't been cleared. So that's,
And for reference, Scottsdale's right at Sun Valley, that's.
yes, and for reference, it's right at Sun Valley. And then while you're at it, Mr. Fire Chief, if you could please also look into, while people are talking about it, requiring people not to replace, because I know that that is a lift for people that don't have the resources, but to never be able to replace with shake roofs. That we fought that many years ago, and I don't know where that stands, but it might be the time to have that conversation again with new development and even building new homes after they have been destroyed by fire to avoid certain materials on the roof and other areas that you know much more about than I do, if you could look into that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the only blessing, Commissioner Jung, and I happen to know this because my house had shake roof. No, is the cost. To replace my shake roof exceeded tile. So it was with medium to heavy shakes. It's very expensive. So that's a benefit, but I don't disagree. I got the kindling off my roof as quickly as I possibly could have because it's just a nightmare waiting to happen. Okay. So, Mr. Edwards, just a quick question here. We'll go to item 15, and then do we hold item 16 for after, because we're going to go into recess? Can we hold that and take our final public comment after we open the doors back up, or do we need to do that down here?
I would
And then
do it
take another-
both.
Okay, okay. All right, anything else on item number 14 for the chief? Okay, item 15, we're back to commissioners and fire chiefs announcements. Chief, do you have anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if
ma'am.
I could, we do have public comment signed in for item 14.
We did not take action on that.
Do you still have to take public comment?
Mr. Edwards?
You're styled for action. You're not taking action, but I would recommend that you take the public comment.
Okay, I thought that was for the final public comment, Madam Clerk. All right, please call public comment.
I have Kathy Brandhorst signed in.
Ms. Brandhorst, we are speaking on item number 14, which is Nevada legislative session and other legislative issues. Welcome.
It's the Nevada legislation's session. I guess everybody knows what the legislative issues are. It is cashing my checks. If your name is not on those checks, you cannot cash them at all. I mean, if you had your whole business filled with bullet holes and the
Ms.
whole
Brandhorst,
floor
how does
was
this-
filled
how
with
does this
bullet
pertain
holes.
to the legislature? This is,
Yes.
there's that, and fire bills on the in front of the legislature. How does that pertain, ma'am?
Well, I guess it would be the response, the 911 calls for the bullet holes in the blood and flesh that's going to be in the business or even in the casinos, because it's going to be an issue where we have to call somebody to come in and find out what is wrong with this building, what happened to it, who's going to restruct it again, does it have to be knocked completely down, and leave a blank spot there, and there would not be nothing on the property at all. So what's going to happen is who's going to be responsible to put that building back together? Are you going to use somebody else's bank accounts in order to put that building back together? Are you going to have to steal somebody's checks in order to put that building back together? Who's responsible? Who's going to rebuild that building? It's a big business for everybody that's involved, and in public too. The public uses that building every day. And they have, you open it up for casino. You open it up for business, restaurants. You also open it up for people who go in there to gamble. You also open it up for musicians.
Ms. Brandhorst, I fail to see how this pertains to legislation. Would you please stay on topic?
Okay, if you have to dial 911 for Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, are they going to respond? Yes, they have to respond. Who else? The REMSA has to respond to put the bodies back together. Are you going to have to respond to who? Who's going to be responding to this 911 call? And, not only that you have to bring out, you have to bring the police out, the sheriffs out, you have to bring out everybody involved in this purpose for the legislature.
Thank you, Ms. Brandhorst. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
There is no one else signed in.
Okay. We will close item 14. Chief, item 15.
Item 15 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be
No,
limited.
item 15 is commissioners and fire chiefs
Oh, I'm
announcements.
sorry, Mr.
sir.
Chairman. Commissioners, fire chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda.
Do you have any such items, Mr. Chief?
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioners, Do I have signing Commissioner Jung? Please.
Mr. Fire Chief, are we having our hired external lobbyists come give us a presentation post-closing of the session?
I certainly would.
I mean, is it part of his contract? I know you don't have the wiggle room if it's part of his contract. I don't want you going out and paying for more of it, because I'm sure you could explain it. But if it is part of his contract, I'd love to see him and hear what happened with annexation and regionalization and any, behind-the-scenes stuff I can't glean from looking at the legislative webpage.
Certainly, I will agenda that, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, anything else? Okay, I will close that. Item number 16, and then we will go into recess. Madam Clerk.
And don't forget, Mr. Chairman, we'll need to go back to item 13.
Yes, yeah, we'll go back to item 13 and then go into recess. And that's why I asked if we take public comment after we open back up, Mr. Edwards.
Item 16 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Madam Clerk, would you call public comment?
First up, we have Tammy Holt still, followed by Sam Dene.
Ms. Holtstill, welcome.
Morning, Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. The reason I'm speaking right now is I was asked by Chief Moore to make a phone call to him to schedule a time because he wanted to go over some stuff that he was looking at doing out in Lemon Valley. And when I did so, I did not get a response. And I did that on 2 different phone calls at 2 different times. So response, kind of interesting. Thank you.
Mr. Sam Dene, followed by Kathy Brandhorst.
Mr. Dene.
Hello, Sam Dene, the guard angel against media wacko freaks and general government bungling. Mr. Trump, if you're listening, and I know you are, release Sam's YouTubes. Release Sam's YouTubes. You ask why? Because they will expose the massive corruption and cowardliness of the Reno media wacko freaks. And you've all seen them in action. And they all support me because they don't like the Reno wacko freaks either. And although they don't publicly support me, in their hearts, they know I am right. All of the bureaucrats and even the media. And I'm not talking about the poor little grunt guy with the camera, or even some of those reporters, all of whom, 3 of whom have, guess what, Mr. Trump? 3 of the reporters here in Reno have taken the name Sam. There's 3 Sam reporters at the Reno Gazette. And then another one of the reporters has taken the letters out of Sam's last name, D-E-H-N-E. What are the chances anyway? What kind of weird wacko freaks Brian Dugan and those people up there running that Reno Gazette? And I'm not saying that the rest of the media is not without sin, but the Reno Gazette is the worst one. And the irony is nobody ever reads the Reno Gazette anymore. And even if they do read it, they don't believe it. So there you are, Mr. Trump. Please release my YouTubes. They're out there, hundreds and hundreds of them, exposing the corruption and the blundering and the cowardness and the treachery. It is really treachery because the Reno Gazette and the other media, but mainly the Reno Gazette, is a government body. It's a government body. It's taxpayer supported, and that's the definition of a government body. Just like these folks here. They are taxpayer funded, among other reasons, and that's the reason that they have to have public comment and that the citizens come down here, and at least citizen Sam and Tammy too, come down here and tell you the truth, and mostly tell you things that you probably don't want to hear. The First Amendment was not made for Buttafuoco kissers. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, nice smiley face. The First Amendment, freedom of speech was made for patriots and warriors and people who were courageous enough to come down here and say the things that everybody else wished they could say. So in essence, Sam, Mr. Trump, I am speaking for 400,000 people here in Reno. Release my YouTubes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Dene.
Ms. Kathy Brandhorst.
Ms. Brandhorst, welcome back.
Thank you. I just wanted to let you know that there is a problem here in Reno, Nevada, a problem in Sparks also. The businesses in Sparks downtown area have been destroyed all the way down to the ground. There's nothing on the property at all. We lost all the casinos. Why? Homeless people were actually living in those buildings. We have their pictures on camera. We tried to destroy all of them that were just freeloading themselves inside the business. And we decided if they're gonna bomb us, because we caught them in the building, we caught them in the business living there. You don't live there. Oh my God. You don't have the right to go and cook in there. You have no right to sleep in there because you don't live there at all. And that was not the only problem. The people who are free loaders, they are also poor people. The poor people paid nothing. They paid nothing in the restaurant. They paid nothing in the place where you go to sleep, which is the hotel, the motels. You paid nothing. You also paid nothing for gambling. So where does that put us? We are out of business. We are no longer in business because this is happening in the casinos. Oh my. So we lost the whole business building. It's gone. We lost a lot more than that. Maybe 12 more buildings were knocked down because of this reason. But somebody stops it for some reason for having them destroyed after what they did to the public. The public does not deserve to have bullet holes in their bodies because they're having some fun, like eating in a restaurant, they pay for it, or even gambling, they pay for it. They did not have a chance at all because you had to come in with your machine gun to make sure that they were going to keep their mouths shut. But, you know, who could do such an awful thing? Our cemeteries are growing so large, so big, that I cannot believe it. I don't even recognize anybody from Nevada anymore because you put them in their cemeteries, their boxes.
Thank you, Ms. Brandhorst. Madam Clerk.
There's no one else signed in.
Okay. I will close public comment, and we will go back to item number 13. Chief.
Item 13 is a possible closed session for the purpose of discussing labor issues with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District per NRS 288.220. Staff recommends that the board resolve to adjourn into closed session.
Okay, so I will, Mr. Edwards, do I need a motion to go into recess, and then we will open back up after closed session and take the final public comment upstairs?
Yes, and this is going to get a little bit complicated. You want a motion to go into recess for closed session, and then I'll just state on the record right now that at the conclusion of the closed session, you will need to open up the caucus doors and then conduct another public comment session and then officially adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
Prior to your motion right now to go into closed session, I'm going to recommend that you open the floor for public comment on that motion only. I know that's very narrow, but it is action, and you are taking that, so I would recommend that you do that, and then do your motion.
Okay. All right, so Madam Clerk, did you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we will open up public comment on item number 13.
Don't we need to make the motion first?
Mr. Edwards, does it matter?
Just on the motion, it's just on the motion, and you need to get the public comment before you take the vote on the motion.
Okay. Okay, I will accept a motion, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I will make a motion what he said. Do you have that, Madam
To go into
Clerk?
recess
To go into recess, as
Right.
explained by our district attorney.
for a closed session. Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Motion by Commissioner Herman, second, motion by Commissioner Burkbigler, second by Commissioner Herman. Before we take that, do we have anyone signed in wishing to speak, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, we have Sam Dene.
Mr. Dene? We are speaking on item number 13. Mr.
Sam
Dene.
Dene, thank you for the information, Mr. Chairman. I am here to support the motion.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else?
We have no one else signed in.
I will close public comment. Any discussion, commissioners? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and again, Commissioner Lucy has been absent. Okay, so we are in recess. We will, it's going to take us a few minutes to get everyone sort of moved around and get Commissioner Lucy on the phone for our county commission meeting. We will reconvene, we'll open our county commission meeting at 10:15.